Good afternoon. My name is Willow Andreasson. Over the course of the past few days, I've been reading out some chapters from my book, which was published on Lulu in 2013, called A Journey into the Mysteries of Life, Lessons from the World Beyond. And this is book one, The End of the Beginning. This is a pretty lengthy chapter. This is chapter 9 I'll be reading, and it's pretty lengthy. So there will probably be two videos today, and this is the first one covering the first half of the chapter 9, which is entitled Ask Her to Let Me Go. I believe that every single person on this planet has experienced a significant event where the issue of life after death could not be ignored or denied. It is highly possible that for many, this moment of realization only actually occurs at the exact time of their passing. For many, however, living with family and friends who have stepped beyond the invisible veil is as natural as drinking the first coffee of the day. Every person sees something that cannot be explained away with the application of scientific rationale. Every person hears a sound that cannot be attributed to thermal cooling. Every person feels a tapping on their shoulder caused by an invisible fingers, yet is as always explained away as an unexpected breeze. There are moments, however, which, even to those who are so finely attuned, so accustomed to living with such phenomena, just leave the person almost speechless with astonishment at the marvel of the event concerned. The experience raises further questions of just how much we truly believe we know, not only about the afterlife, but also about life as we understand it to be. By the new year of 2005, after my youngest daughter was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and my oldest daughter's health problems began to mount, I opted to become a full-time parent carer. I knew I needed to retain a semblance of time to myself because, as all carers would resoundingly state, caring becomes an all-absorbing role. Feeling a strong need to expand my knowledge of the afterlife, I decided to start visiting a local spiritualist church. I will state now that I initially entered the church with some considerable degree of trepidation. Many of the written accounts I had past read in relation to spiritualist churches had generally been derogatory in nature, e.g. mediums standing with trumpets suspended in mid-air in dusty old halls. I wish to reassure you that these images are really completely removed from the reality. The church I attended was, and remains, warm and welcoming. The building was modern, the seating was comfortable, and everyone was so friendly towards this stranger who lived 35 minutes down the motorway from them. People from all walks of life attended the church. The mediums were local mediums, and we were blessed by many genuinely talented individuals. Steaming cups of delicious tea and coffee would always be served up at the end of the service. Many friendships were formed, and the church also tirelessly helped local pet charities. In fact, this church is, without doubt, the most spiritual building I have entered in my life. As I mentioned earlier, if push came to shove and naming a creed became a necessity, I would proudly proclaim that I am a spiritualist. To my mind, the description is an all-encompassing one. All religions are, supposedly, spiritualist in foundation. All religions share one tenet, and that is the concept of faith. Actually, one is going to throw a controversial question into the mix. Is there really much difference between attending a spiritualist church, believing that contact will be established with a relative on the other side of the veil, and attending a conventional Catholic church, believing that Jesus or God will absolve you of all your sins? I reiterate, both require a crucial fundamental tenet of spiritualism, faith. It could equally be argued that spiritualism is a philosophical concept. Couldn't the same be argued of any religion, though? There are 7 principles of spiritualism. These principles were based on direct spirit communications received by medium Emma Harding Britton during the mid-19th century. The fatherhood of God, the deity of your choice. Brotherhood of man, what an individual can do to be of service to mankind. The communion of spirits and the ministry of angels. The continuous existence of the human soul. Personal responsibility, accepting responsibility for one's own actions. Compensation and retribution hereafter for all good and evil deeds done on earth. And eternal progress open to every soul. As I surmised in earlier paragraphs and given the message imparted by the 7 principles, it is easy to understand why I feel so strongly that all religions really are spiritualist in foundation. I felt very comfortable attending the church. From memory, Grandfather came through via the evening's guest medium on my first visit. I wish I had taken notes of messages from Grandfather and my sister via the wonderfully talented mediums at the church. One of the mediums was reduced to tears of laughter by my sister's caustic wit. I noted that the church held an open circle for those interested in developing their mediumistic skills. I started attending, in earnest, only a few weeks after I had first stepped foot inside the church. Guidance and training is relaxed, but firm boundaries are established from the very beginning. The trainee medium learns how to meditate for brief periods prior to opening up the chakras. Most important of all, the reader needs to learn the vital practice of protection. A reader must never receive spirit without opening and closing the session properly. The form of protection I always use is one that I learned at the church, imagining oneself surrounded by an impenetrable golden or white cocoon of light. This protects the medium from negative entities. At no point during early periods of learning is a spirit allowed to use the reader as a vocal channel. There aren't many mediums who are able to enter trance or enable spirit to use them as a channel for direct voice communications. Those who can enable communications in these manners are often highly gifted psychics with many years of mediumship guidance and platform work under their belts. During my time in the open circle, I developed other useful skills. I learned how to provide readings using different coloured ribbons. I honed my clairsentient abilities, becoming more discerning and adept at identifying what was and what was not a genuine clairsentient experience. In relation to clairsentient ability, I would like to state at this point that I continue to apply the guidance I received at the church, always applying the Occam's razor principle to an experience prior to reaching a conclusion as to whether that experience is genuine or not. The strength of one's imagination can never be underestimated. For example, entering an old building is inevitably going to generate feelings akin to clairsentience, especially if there is foreknowledge of the history of the building concerned. You're in a 10th century fort, and the smell of history lingers in the air. The imagination wanders, and you begin to wonder if eyes of old are watching you through dusty crevices in those ancient walls of stone. Another example of a man-made phenomenon that is capable of generating similar sensations of hauntings is that of high EMF electromagnetic field readings, mentioned frequently on shows such as Ghost Hunters Almost Haunted. These sensations are generated by virtue of the frequency emitted by high-power electrical cables, for example. Thanks to the guidance received at the church, I am able to isolate and discern the differences between causal symptoms within physical surroundings and genuine clairsentient phenomena. The unheard hum of an electricity pylon generally makes me feel decidedly unwell. A clairsentient experience generally does not. Another skill I developed and thoroughly enjoyed was that of psychometry. This practice entails holding an object which belongs to a person, living or past. Psychometry works on the premise that a psychic imprint has been left on the item by the owner. The skilled reader can feel reams of information about the person, or even about the object itself. Strict parameters and watertight guidelines are set for readers and readings. There is no room for error. To ensure the trainee readers were unable to employ cold reading tactics or be unduly influenced by a person's appearance, we were blindfolded prior to a reading. If glasses were worn by the reader, they were asked to remove them prior to the blindfold being placed on them, to prevent any gaps forming between the cloth and the skin. The trainee was unaware of the gender or identity of the sitter in front of them, and no advance hints were ever given. The most contact afforded to the trainee medium was a 2-second touch of the sitter's knee. The items used in psychometry readings were always sealed in slightly padded envelopes. This makes logical sense. After all, if someone places a rosary in your hands, the natural conclusion the reader is going to reach is that the owner of the beads was of the Roman Catholic faith. More crucially, if the reader could not feel any connection to the sitter, or the signal was effectively blank, the reader was always advised to state to the sitter that this was the case. I was told by the guides at the church that I had great promise as a clairvoyant medium. It is to my eternal regret that I did not extend my studies further. I always enjoyed the readings given to the sitters. I also met some very interesting characters from the other side of the veil. Sometimes they were quiet and only wanted to say hello. Others could chat away for England. There were 3 notable readings in particular that I really enjoyed. For the first 2, I was the reader providing the messages. The third, I was the sitter for the practicing medium. Only rarely were blindfold-free readings permitted, and this reading occurred during one such occasion. I was able to see the sitter, who was female. Her face, however, was a blank canvas and her body language neutral. I immediately felt a connection coming through for her. A lovely, warm, affable older woman clearly stated that she was the sitter's aunt. The aunt was clearly keen to ensure that her niece understood that she was genuinely there for her. I picked up the aunt's enthusiasm as she expressed the joy that she and the sitter's uncle felt upon moving into their brand-new council house back in the 1950s. I was able to accurately describe that they lived just outside a major town in Berkshire. I was able to describe their perfectly gorgeous little front garden and their first car. The sitter could not contain her smiles any longer. She later confirmed that everything I had described to her about her aunt, where she lived, her house and her car, was spot on. The second reading occurred during a different evening. 4 of us were continuing our training in psychometry. My turn arrived, and I was handed a sealed envelope. It was, as was the custom, slightly padded. I could immediately sense that the item concerned was metallic in nature. To my left I felt a powerful presence standing just behind me. My head began to throb relentlessly. Information was absolutely streaming through. The woman was very much the matriarch of her family. She was a powerful soul and made it abundantly clear to me that she wished to use me as a channel. She instantly reminded me of my own grandmother, the central pivot of a family. She was stern but fair. I felt she was fiercely protective of her family. I knew she had passed on and had been on the other side for a considerable length of time. She explained that she was a devout Roman Catholic during her time on earth. She was at peace. An image came into my mind of her earthly features. She wasn't very tall, with dark hair. I felt sure she coloured her hair, but couldn't definitively tell if that was the case. Her accent was drenched with a gorgeous Irish lilt. After the initial introductory tension, I relaxed into the reading and was enjoying relating my communication with this wonderful woman to the group around me. Finally, our guest had said everything she needed to say and divulged that the item in the envelope was a crucifix. I expressed immense gratitude that I had met her. She said thank you in return before heading back to her home. The group's guide was beaming from ear to ear as I voiced that the item in the envelope was a crucifix. "You may as well open it now," she laughed heartily. As I did so, a solid but delicately ornate crucifix tumbled into my open hand. "Did you know who she was?" asked the guide. I knew that she was the grandmother of one of my fellow group members, but couldn't firmly establish the identity of her granddaughter. "She was my grandmother," smiled the group's guide. Second video will detail the third reading, which is probably the most mind-blowing of my experiences at the church, and as I say, I will continue that in a second video.